Every single one of us has done it. You pulled the steak off the grill a little too late, or the toast popped up a shade past golden, or the pot roast sat under the broiler for one more minute because you got distracted by the phone ringing, and there it was, that dark edge, that black crust. And you looked at it for half a second, made a decision, and ate it anyway. Maybe you scraped it off first. Maybe you didn't even bother. I want you to sit with that for a second, because that split-second decision, the one you've made 1,000 times without thinking about it, is exactly what this video is about. Not because I want to scare you away from your grill or your toaster, but because there is real chemistry happening in that blackened crust, chemistry your body has to deal with, and almost nobody has ever explained it to you in a way that actually makes sense. Stay with me all the way to the end, because the last thing I'm going to tell you today is the one combination, a very specific, very common combination, that changes the entire risk picture, and it is not the one most people assume. If you think you already know the worst thing you can do to meat before it hits your plate, I'd put money on you being wrong. I'll tell you exactly what it is, and exactly what to do instead before we're done. My name is Dr. Park. I've spent more than 15 years practicing internal medicine, and alongside that, doing research in nutritional biochemistry, which is really just the study of what food does to the human body once you get past the plate, down to the cellular level. I trained partly in Korea, where there's a very old idea in traditional medicine called yaksik dongwon, the idea that food and medicine share the same root, that what heals you and what feeds you were never meant to be two separate things. I bring that lens to a lot of what I talk about on this channel. But I want to say this clearly, right at the start, because it matters for today especially. Korean does not mean safer. Traditional does not mean risk-free. You're going to see exactly what I mean by that in a few minutes, because today's topic runs straight through one of the most beloved grilling traditions in the world, and I'm not going to let it off the hook just because it's the food I grew up with. I'm also not here to sell you a supplement, a course, or a fear-based reason to check out my next video. I'm here to walk you through the actual research, the actual mechanisms, and what they mean for you specifically after 50. So let's start with what's actually happening, because I think once you understand this, the rest of the video will click into place fast. When you cook meat, fish, or poultry at very high dry heat, grilling over an open flame, pan searing in a screaming hot skillet, broiling close to the element, two things start happening on a molecular level. First, a natural compound in muscle tissue called creatine reacts with amino acids and sugars on the surface of the meat, and under intense heat, that reaction produces a family of compounds called heterocyclic amines. Second, when fat and juices drip down onto an open flame or a hot surface, they don't just burn away quietly, they produce smoke, and that smoke carries a different family of compounds called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which then settle right back down onto the surface of your food. Both of these families of compounds have to be processed by your liver once you eat them. And here's the part that matters for a 50-plus body specifically. Your liver, in the course of trying to break these compounds down and clear them out, can temporarily convert some of them into a more reactive form, a process called bioactivation. And in that reactive state, they're capable of binding directly to your DNA and forming what's called a DNA adduct. Your body has repair systems that catch and fix this kind of damage constantly, thousands of times a day, quietly, without you ever knowing it happened. But repair capacity is not infinite, and it is not something that stays perfectly sharp forever. Over decades of exposure, and I want you to really hear that word, decades, the math changes. One charred burger at a July barbecue when you were 35 is not the same exposure, biologically, as 40 years of well-done flame-charred meat 2 or 3 nights a week. This is a cumulative story, not a single bite story. Keep that in your mind, because it's going to come back again and again today. I want to give you one mental model to carry through everything I'm about to say, because it will turn this from a list of scary facts into something you can actually use. There are 3 chemical families at play here, and I want you to remember their names, even loosely, because you're going to see at least one of them in almost everything on this list. Heterocyclic amines, I'll just call them HCAs, form in the muscle meat itself under high dry heat. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, form in smoke, especially from fat hitting an open flame, and land on the surface of your food. And the third one, nitrosamines, form when nitrites, the preservatives used in cured and processed meats like bacon, hot dogs, and deli ham, react with certain compounds in the body or in the food itself, and that reaction is accelerated by heat. HCAs, PAHs, nitrosamines, 3 names. Keep them loose in your head, and by the end of this video, you'll be able to look at your own dinner and know exactly which one you're dealing with, and what to actually do about it. Now, before we climb into the list, I want to tell you how this video is built, because it's a little different from a straight avoid this list. Some of what's coming is going to bust a genuine myth, a belief a lot of health-conscious people hold with real confidence, that turns out to be wrong in one direction or the other. And some of it is a straightforward habit swap. Stop doing this, start doing that instead. I'll make it obvious which is which as we go, because I don't want you walking away from this video more confused than when you started. That's not what good medicine does, and it's not what I'm here for. Let's start with the one that surprises almost everyone, in a good way. There's a widespread belief that burnt toast, deeply browned roasted potatoes, and dark pizza crust carry the same kind of cancer concern as a charred steak. I hear this constantly, and here's the myth bust. They don't work through the same chemistry at all, and the evidence behind them is genuinely different. What forms in brown starchy foods, bread, potatoes, coffee beans, crackers, is a compound called acrylamide, created through something called the Maillard reaction, the same browning reaction responsible for flavor development in baking and roasting. Acrylamide has been studied extensively, and animal studies at high doses have shown it to be carcinogenic enough that the International Agency for Research on Cancer, the cancer research arm of the World Health Organization, classifies it as probably carcinogenic to humans. That sounds alarming, and I don't want to minimize it. But here's the honest, responsible part I need you to hear. Large human population studies looking at people's actual dietary acrylamide intake, from toast, fries, chips, roasted vegetables, have not consistently shown an increased cancer risk at the levels people actually eat. Some studies show a weak association for certain cancers, others show none at all. This is a case where the animal evidence is stronger than the human evidence, and I think it's important to tell you that plainly, rather than rounding it up into something scarier than the research actually supports. So what should you do? Don't panic over your toast. You don't need to inspect every roasted potato with a magnifying glass. But it's still a reasonable low-effort habit to avoid the truly blackened bitter parts, not the golden brown, but the black, the same way you trim a burnt edge off anything. A lighter toaster setting and cutting away any genuinely charred bits is a sensible, zero-cost habit. Nothing more dramatic than that is required here. Now we move to the real headline. Charred meat, steak, chicken, fish, cooked at very high, dry heat until the outside is deeply browned or blackened, sits in an entirely different evidence category, and I need you to understand why, because it's the center of everything that follows. The concern around meat is not just about smoke and browning, it's specifically about the combination of the heat chemistry I described in the introduction, HCAs and PAHs, and a particular vulnerable window in your own aging body. Specifically, your gut microbiome, the bacteria living in your colon, changes significantly in composition as you enter middle age and beyond. Your liver's phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification capacity, the system that breaks down HCAs and PAHs, does not stay as sharp at 70 as it was at 30. And the kind of chronic, low-grade inflammation that's sitting underneath so many diseases after 50, the kind of thing you can't feel, the kind of thing nobody tells you about because your annual physical never quite has time for it, is exactly the context in which HCAs and PAHs have been shown to pose a higher risk. It's not that they're suddenly toxic where they weren't before. It's that the body that's processing them has changed. This is the vulnerable window I want you to hold in mind through everything that follows. After 50, the math changes. That's the thesis of everything you're about to hear. It's not that nobody should ever eat a charred steak. It's that the decision to do it regularly starts mattering, in a way it didn't before. So here's the first thing I want to bust. The scrape it off myth. A huge number of health-conscious people, and I mean a huge number, have convinced themselves that if they just scrape the blackened crust off a charred steak, they've solved the problem. This is where I need to tell you the truth. This does help, but not nearly as much as people think, because HCAs form in the meat itself, not just on the surface. When a steak is cooked at very high temperature throughout the interior, which is what happens when you cook it to well done, HCAs are distributed all the way through the muscle, not just on the crust. Scraping gives you maybe half the benefit, and I want you to hear that. Maybe half, compared to simply not cooking it to well done in the first place. A medium-rare interior, which contains far fewer HCAs, is genuinely lower risk than a scraped-off well-done piece. So the real habit swap here is not scraping, it's using a thermometer. A basic meat thermometer costs $10. You stick it into the thickest part of the meat, and you cook to safe internal temperature. 165 for poultry, 160 for ground meat, 135 for a rare steak. Not a guess, not a finger poke, not, it looks done, a number. And I know some of you are already thinking, but I like well-done meat. I always have, and I'm not changing now, and I hear that, I do. But I'm not asking you to eat rare if you hate it. I'm asking you to cook to safe temperature and stop there, instead of pushing it further into well done as a default. If you like a steak cooked to 145 degrees internal temperature, that is perfectly safe, and it is vastly lower in HCAs than a 165-degree gray well done finish. Second thing, keep fat off the flame. When fat hits an open flame or a very hot surface, it doesn't just cook, it burns. And when it burns, it produces PHs, the smoke compounds I mentioned earlier. These stick to your food, and they're concentrated on the surface. A drip pan, even a disposable aluminum one under the grates, catches the fat before it hits the flame. Indirect heat, if your grill has it, means the food cooks next to a heat source rather than directly over flame. Both of these are zero-effort switches, and they drop your PAH exposure significantly. If you see a flare-up, a sudden burst of flame from fat hitting hot coals, move the food away from that spot immediately. Don't fight the flame, just move. Third, flip often. This is going to sound counterintuitive to anyone who's been told that you should let meat sit on a grill without fussing, but the science is clear on this one. Frequent flipping reduces the time the surface is directly exposed to heat, which means less charring, and less charring means fewer HCAs and PAHs. Flipping every minute or two, rather than once or twice total, is a genuinely protective move. You're not fussing, you're protecting. Fourth thing, and this one will surprise some of you, there's data, not huge amounts, but real data, suggesting that a quick, very gentle microwave pre-cook before grilling actually helps. Just 30 seconds to a minute on medium power, enough to take the chill off and start the internal cooking very gently. Means that when it hits the grill, it needs less surface heat to reach safe internal temperature, which again means less charring, less HCA formation overall. Don't skip the microwave for this. A 2-minute active microwave cook is not the same as what I'm describing. 30 seconds, just to take the cold off. That's the difference. Fifth thing, marinade with acid and herbs. This is the one where I'm going to tell you something that's probably going to surprise you, because it runs against a lot of popular health food messaging. Marinating with acid, vinegar or citrus, and herbs, especially rosemary or oregano, for at least 30 minutes before grilling significantly reduces HCA formation. The mechanism is fascinating. The acidic, antioxidant-rich environment of an herb marinade actually interferes with the chemical reactions that produce HCAs at high temperatures. It doesn't eliminate them, but the reduction is substantial, somewhere in the range of 50 to 90%, depending on which herbs you use. The most studied herbs for this are rosemary, oregano, thyme, and garlic. A basic marinade might be olive oil, red wine vinegar or lemon juice, garlic, and whatever herb appeals to you. 2 parts oil to 1 part acid, 15 minutes of mashing to infuse, and 30 minutes minimum on the meat. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated, but the effect is real and it's substantial. The acid is doing the protecting work, not some special supplement or pricey ingredient, just vinegar or citrus. Sixth, and this is the last of the direct cooking techniques, save sugary and sweet sauces for the very last few minutes of cooking only. High-heat caramelization of sugars produces another compound in the AGE family, advanced glycation end products, which is its own separate risk factor, and which amplifies the inflammatory response to HCAs. If you love a barbecue sauce or a glaze, use it, but put it on in the last 2 or 3 minutes only, after the meat is finished cooking to safe temperature, not at the start. Early sauce means prolonged high-heat sugar caramelization. Late sauce means flavor without the compounded risk. And then the seventh, final, and honestly most important thing, build your plate deliberately. This is the one that actually changes the game the most, because it's not about what you're excluding, it's about what you're including, and how much of it. Every single grilled meal should be built with a real, substantial portion of vegetables on that plate, not as a garnish, but as half or more of what you're eating. Vegetables contain compounds that actively counteract inflammation and support your body's own repair systems, especially garlic and onion, which contain compounds that specifically modulate your gut bacteria in protective ways. Garlic and onion on a plate with charred meat is not just flavor, it's actually protective chemistry. This is not new science. This is not controversial. The research on the protective effect of polyphenol-rich vegetables against the inflammatory effects of cooked meat is extremely solid, and it's been replicated many times. The single best thing you can do is not eat less meat. It's eat more vegetables on that same plate. Be especially mindful with processed and cured meats, bacon, hot dogs, sausage, because those are where the risks compound rather than just add. Remember nitrosamines? Those form when nitrites in the cured meat react with heat and with certain compounds in your body. And those risks are specifically lower when you're eating plenty of vitamin C and folate-rich vegetables, spinach, kale, citrus, at the same meal. Casual bacon once or twice a month on a plate piled with vegetables and accompanied by fresh fruit is a genuinely different exposure than bacon 3 times a week is the main thing. It's not the fire that decides this. It's what you do around it. I want you to hold on to that line because it's the thesis of everything I've just walked you through, and I'm going to come back to it one more time before we're done. So let's talk about how you actually build this into a real life, because a list of 6 things is useless if it just sits in your head as anxiety. Here's how I'd put it together into an actual routine, something you could start on your very next cookout. Before the meat goes anywhere near heat, trim the visible fat and let it sit in an acidic, herb-based marinade for at least 30 minutes. Vinegar or citrus, garlic, rosemary, or another herb you like, nothing complicated. When you cook it, use indirect heat or a drip pan so fat isn't hitting an open flame, and flip every minute or 2 rather than walking away. Cook to the correct safe internal temperature using a thermometer, not to a well-done deeply browned finish out of habit. If you're using a sweet, sugary sauce, save it for the last few minutes only, and build the rest of the plate around it, deliberately. A real pile of vegetables, something with garlic or onion in it, not as a garnish, but as an equal partner to the protein on your plate. That's the whole routine. It doesn't take longer. It doesn't cost more. It's a different set of small decisions around the exact same cookout you were already planning to have. Let me tell you about a patient I'll call Harold, because I think his story will land this better than any statistic I could give you. Harold was 68 when I met him, a retired mechanic, and grilling was, in his words, the one hobby my wife lets me have in peace. 4, sometimes 5 nights a week, spring through fall, for as long as he could remember. His father had died of colon cancer in his 60s, and that history had been sitting quietly in the back of Harold's mind for years, without him ever really talking about it. The kind of thing you know, but don't examine too closely. When it came up in conversation, I didn't tell him to give up the grill. I want to be very clear about that, because that's not what this was about, and it's not what I'm telling you either. We talked through exactly what I've walked you through today. The marinade, the indirect heat, the thermometer instead of the well-done habit, the pile of vegetables that went from a side thought to half the plate. He kept every single cookout. What changed was almost entirely invisible to anyone watching him grill. A few months later, he told me something that stuck with me, and it's the reason I bring him up at all. He said it didn't feel like something being taken away from him. It felt like something he was adding. A little more care, a little more attention to a thing he already loved, rather than one more restriction stacked on top of a life that already had enough of those after 60. That's the shift I want for you too. Not less joy at the grill, more intention around it. Now, a few honest caveats, because I'd rather earn your trust by telling you where this general guidance stops applying than let you assume it covers every situation. Everything I've described today is general, population-level guidance, built for a healthy adult managing long-term risk. It is not personalized medical advice, and it can't account for your specific history. If you have a personal or family history of colorectal, stomach, or pancreatic cancer, the way Harold did, this is genuinely worth a direct conversation with your doctor. Not just about diet, but about whether you're due for colon cancer screening, a colonoscopy, or an appropriate alternative test. Because screening catches things diet alone never will, and nothing in this video should ever be a reason to delay or skip a screening you're due for. If you're currently undergoing cancer treatment or managing another serious condition, please talk to your own physician or a registered dietitian before making any significant changes to how you eat. Some treatments come with their own specific dietary guidance. That should take priority over anything general I say in a video like this one. And I want to say this one more time, because it's the whole point of today. Nothing here is about giving up grilling, or giving up meat, or living in fear of your own kitchen. It's about a handful of small, specific technique changes that let you keep the thing you love while lowering a real cumulative exposure over the years ahead. Let's bring it all together, quickly, because I know that was a lot. Burnt toast and brown potatoes carry a different, less proven risk than charred meat. Don't panic over your toaster, just skip the truly black bits. Scraping char off meat doesn't fully solve the problem. Use a thermometer and stop defaulting to well done. Keep fat off the open flame with a drip pan or indirect heat, and move food away from any flare-up. Flip frequently, and consider a quick microwave pre-cook before grilling. Marinate with acid and herbs for real protection, and save sugary sauces for the very last few minutes. Build every grilled meal around a genuine pile of vegetables and garlic, whether it's a Korean tabletop grill or an American backyard one. The tradition doesn't grant an exemption, but the habit built around it is worth keeping. And be especially mindful with charred, processed, and cured meats, bacon, hot dogs, sausage, since that's where the risks stack rather than simply add. If you only start with 2 things tonight, make it these. Use a thermometer instead of your eyes, and keep fat away from the flame. Those 2 alone address the largest, most avoidable pieces of everything we talked about today. It's not the fire that decides this. It's what you do around it. That's true of your grill, and honestly, it's true of most things we're afraid of after 50. The danger was never in having the thing you love. It was always in the handful of habits sitting quietly around it, waiting for someone to actually explain them to you. I'd genuinely love to know which one of these surprised you the most. Tell me in the comments. I read every single one of them, and if you're the type who marinates already, or the type who's been scraping char off your steak for 30 years thinking that solved it, I especially want to hear from you. If this channel's promise means something to you, real, sourced information about healthy aging after 60, no fear, no upsell, just the research your appointment never has time for, consider subscribing, because that's genuinely the whole mission here. Next week, I'm covering the 5 everyday drinks quietly raising blood pressure in people who don't even think of themselves as big drinkers of anything, and at least 2 of them are going to surprise you. Until then, take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.